I'm Paul McGuire. I should announce it because we're going to air it on the internet. All of you have, well, really, I don't want to do Q&A, but all of you have heard the news about Israel, right?
No.
Okay, so let me give you a brief recap of it. And it's very disturbing. President Obama made a speech today, and if you heard the tone of his voice, it was a very forceful speech in which he endorsed the Palestinians and their demand for a Palestinian state, and that Israel would return to its 1967 borders, in which Israel was much smaller than it is today. But the 1967 war was an all-time historic war in human history. Some people believe it was when the times of the Gentiles ended during the 1967 war. They recaptured the Temple Mount, and for whatever reasons, probably political pressure, they gave back the Temple Mount to the Palestinians, even though they didn't have to. But what they did is they took the lands that were rightfully theirs, but they also took lands where the terrorists could come in and hurt them. And these are the very lands that Obama he's forcing them to give back those lands. So if the Palestinians get those lands, this puts Israel in extremely high risk because physically the terrorists are right inside of Israel. A short missile, a short rocket, bombs, it becomes an operation center for terrorism against Israel, but now you can't properly defend yourself against it because it's right inside of you. Now the other thing to remember is that when God gave the land of Israel to Abraham and his descendants, it was a huge territory. I mean, it was large. So the little sliver they have now is a tiny percentage of what God gave them. And if you look at a map of Israel and the Middle Eastern nations and the Arabian nations, etc., they have these gigantic pieces of land. They're huge. They're enormous. And Israel is this little itsy-bitsy sliver. So being that probably 90% of all this land out there, that the Arab zone, etc., is just desert. And you notice that the Arabs and the Palestinians, not the Palestinians, the Arabs and some of those other countries, they have never offered to take the Palestinians in. And they have billions of dollars of oil money. They could have housed them. They could have built homes. They had plenty of money. They could have educated them. But they didn't. Instead, they preferred to blame Israel. Because there is a anti-Semitic hatred of the Jews that goes back thousands of years. And it's what caused all the problems in World War II and Adolf Hitler, etc., etc. And I was reading this article about the power structures in the United States, and anti-Semitism is quite prevalent. I assume it's prevalent today. It's just not spoken about openly. But it was quite prevalent among world leaders 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in the United States. Powerful men, powerful groups who really hated the Jews. And it's very sad to know that Billy Graham, they found tapes, you heard that, right? And I'm paraphrasing, but he was meeting with Richard Nixon, and Richard Nixon had made some remarks derogatory towards the Jews. And Billy Graham agreed with him on tape. Now, this tape, I guess, was hidden for since the Nixon administration, and it recently surfaced, I don't remember how many years ago, but it's been pretty recent. And Billy Graham, when it was released, didn't deny it. I mean, how could you deny it? It's not tape. And apologized to the Jewish community. But the point is, at one time in his life, he was, well, I'm not going to say what he was. All I can say is he made those comments. And I would suspect that the reason he made those comments was because, I mean, he taught Bible prophecy, but I would have to suspect he did not understand the role of Israel in Bible prophecy. Because you can't be anti-Semitic when you understand the role of Israel in Bible prophecy. You can't be. And it's brutally obvious that God's not finished with Israel, because the prophets predicted that the Jews would be regathered in the land in the last days. They were officially regathered in 1948. That was miraculous. Approximately 2,000 years after being dispersed among the nations and sold into slavery. And when they were dispersed among the nations, it occurred, Christ warned the Jewish people that after he and his disciples, that after he went to be with the Lord, after he ascended into heaven, he said, not one stone of this temple will be unturned. And he predicted the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the Jewish temple. So, a number of years later, AD 70, the Roman general Titus came in, totally destroyed the temple, stone by stone, and they totally destroyed Jerusalem, and they either killed the Jews or they sold them as slaves to nations all around the world. So the Jews have been dispersed to all the nations of the world. They were in Europe and Eastern Europe. We know what happened to them with Adolf Hitler and the Holocaust. And then they finally got their land back after about 2,000 years. That's a long time between the prophecies of their return and their actual return in 1948. And everything we're seeing now, I mean, every day, as predicted by the Old Testament prophets, as predicted by Christ and the Apostle Paul, Israel is always front and center in the news. So this conflict that goes back to the time of Abraham is right, it's the focal point of world attention, right, even today. And that's amazing in and of itself. And so we should not be surprised as to what happened. Now, we remember that in the Abrahamic covenant, I've quoted this often, God says, those that bless Israel, or those that bless thee, I will bless, and those that curse thee, I will curse. A very simple pronouncement. So when the head of the United States of America is using his enormous power to divide Jerusalem and endanger it to terrorists, he is in effect cursing Israel. And what will happen, and he's not the only president to do so, most of them have. I mean, we've been a friend to Israel, but this is probably the most outrageous, in-your-face, aggressive siding with the Palestinians that's ever come from the White House. We've never had that before. Now, we also know that really this is not Obama. Okay? So it's very tempting. I mean, I don't know what Obama's feelings are. I can only guess from his background. And that's pure speculation because I don't know what's going on inside of his head. But he's not acting. We must always remember when we're tempted to dislike a high-level political leader, he's not acting on his own. He was placed there by other powers, and those powers are controlling him now. So there are powers behind the throne, directing him. There are very powerful men and groups that are directing this. You understand? And that's the scary part. This is not Obama. This is Soros, the Council on Foreign Relations, Jimmy Carter, Brzezinski. They planned this years ago. And they were really the architect. Rockefeller, the head of the Council on Foreign Relations, Soros, who's obviously involved with the Council on Foreign Relations, Soros, they want to see Israel divided. Now let me ask you a question, and I'm not claiming to know all the answers. I don't think anybody does. But let's just ask ourselves the question for a moment. Looking at current events over the last 6 months, we see massive uprisings in Egypt, and then Gaddafi's nation, and all over the Middle East, so-called popular uprising against strong leaders. Now, my question to you is, do you think those uprisings are just spontaneous? Are they just the people getting mad and demanding the overthrow of the leaders?
No.
No, it's obviously orchestrated. So, some other group is stirring it up. And some other group, globally or whatever, wants to see these strongmen or whatever overthrown. And this whole thing with the social media and how it stirred up the people, that's a bunch of baloney. That didn't happen. They didn't start texting each other and twittering each other. You know, this was organized, and it wasn't organized from within. That's my opinion. So we take that, and then we take the killing of Osama bin Laden, which happened relatively recently, and now we have this speech that puts American foreign policy into overdrive to divide Israel. Wouldn't you think, do you think this just happened, that these are not connected events? Is this just, well, it just happened to happen this way? Or is this is this based on the sequence of events? Do you think it's orchestrated or not?
Well, we're your students, we think not.
What?
We're your students, we think not. We know how you think.
What?
We know how you think.
I know, that's good. That's good. So, in my opinion, it looks like it's orchestrated very carefully. And I can't tell, I mean, I can speculate, but it's all part of a great chess game. And I won't get into the bin Laden thing. There's so many questions surrounding that. And then the head of the IMF, you know, I don't know what really happened, but there's obviously, well, first of all, it shows you something of the character. This is the guy that was going to be like head of the One World Bank. Because the IMF and the World Bank together were going to be the head of the coming One World Economic System, which is, I'm doing in a new DVD series. And so this guy supposedly, allegedly, because I haven't read the police reports, has a history of, being, let's say, sexually aggressive towards women. I don't know what terminology to use. What?
Womanizing.
Well, it's not illegal. It's not illegal to womanize, but it is illegal to.
But he's married.
It is illegal to rape or pressure or whatever. So we don't know whether he did or didn't, right? But at first I thought, oh, this is a bunch of baloney. You know, the head of France, Sarkozy, and other people saying that, you know, it was a, you know, there's a plot going on. At first I said baloney. He's a powerful man and he's pulling strings. But then when I read it, and then I saw the picture of the female who was chosen to be the new head of the IMF, and she's all smiley and perky, and her hair is done perfectly. And again, you can't always judge by appearances, but I do. I learned that from my mother, by the way. And then the Holy Spirit amplifies it. But my mother taught me how to read people at a young age. And then when there was something wrong with somebody, she could see it. And she taught me how to see it. It doesn't mean I always can see it, because I can't. But you develop the ability to discern, and then when the Holy Spirit's involved, it becomes even more powerful. Where people are coming from, or are they dangerous? And I don't like to say what gifts of the Holy Spirit I have publicly, but I do have the gift of discernment, and in a strong way. But it only operates when there's something dangerous or threatening in a person. It's like a light surrounds the person, and I can see it in their eyes. I mean, I looked into people's eyes and I've seen the spirit of murder, and it's creepy.
Yeah. But
you get the feeling like this man has killed somebody, So, a superficial judgment on my part would not stand up in any court. But she looked like she was prepped for the job, that this was no surprise for her, that she knew she was going to move in. She may not have known what was going to happen to him. She probably didn't know what was going to happen to him. But she was ready. And for whatever reason, and that's my guess. And again, I'm not God, I don't know the answer. So that's an interesting thing. And then I've talked numerous times to you about the interview with George Soros and the BBC and the destruction of the dollar, right? Okay. And he continues to talk about it quite openly. So this constant deterioration of the dollar, when you go to the gas pump, and I know I've said this, but I want to emphasize it again, and you see the high price for a barrel of gas, and when you go to the grocery store and what used to cost you $75 is now $125, okay? And it's the same stuff I used to buy, okay? Or I went to a restaurant, you know the name of a restaurant, it's a chain restaurant, and the same meal is now $30, $40 more. That is not because the cost of food went up, and it is not because the cost of gas went up. It's because the value of the dollar has been diluted by printing money from nothing. So your dollar is worthless, so you need more of it to purchase something. So you're actually seeing the results of what the Federal Reserve has been doing. It's no longer mysterious. It's right in your face if you understand that this is not the cost of goods and services going up. It's the fact that the dollar buys less. It has less value. Now let's translate this to personal terms for our economy. That means your retirement, which has probably already been hit hard if you were invested in mutual funds or whatever. Most people experienced a 60% loss of their retirement funds. And have not gained it back. That's a hard hit. Most people in California have experienced an enormous hit on the value of their real estate. So their nest egg is wiped out. So not only is their retirement and their monetary value been substantially lowered, but if you add in the thing that people don't really seem to grasp, the value of what they have is being cut in half. So you're being double slashed, and most people don't know about the second slash. So let's say you're getting a retirement pension. I'm just going to pull a number out of the air. Let's say $2,000 a month. And let's say had you not been hit by the economic crisis, you would have had $4,000 a month. Or let's say it's a fixed pension and you're getting $2,000 a month. That may only be worth $1,000 of actual dollar value by the time you need it. It's a very insidious form of stealing your money and your wealth. Now, on top of that, one of the largest banks in the United States, do not name the name. This is going on the internet. You name the name, it's going to be a real pain of editing, and you will pay for it dearly. They announced interest rates of 30% on their credit card. 20% is that right? 30%? You cannot have an economic recovery when people are already leaning on their credit cards to make it through, and then charge 30% interest. People will never get out of debt. And that's what they want, because they want to take your assets.